Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. As always, I'm your host, Stuart Cranes, and this is your inside track to success. As you guys know, every single week we have a new message or guest on who is going to help you up-level your life, up-level your goals, and help you untangle the knots that we get caught in our heads each and every day as we are pursuing the lives of our dreams. Before I introduce today's guest, who I know you're going to get a ton out of having here this week, please go ahead and hit that like button. As always, please share this out with somebody that you know if you get any sort of value from today's conversation, which I'm pretty confident you will. Again, y'all, this is a totally free show. We don't have any sponsors. So do us a favor, help us become more relevant in the search functions over on Spotify in particular, so that more people can gain the wisdom, gain the knowledge, and be impacted by this show. So without further ado, y'all, I want to introduce this week's episode. This is somebody that my wife actually met at a public speaking event about a year ago, and she could not have spoken more highly of him. He is somebody that is a mental health and wellness, not only advocate, but trainer, is somebody that leads talks, leads trainings on this subject in particular in schools, in corporations, supporting people in the mental aspect of what they're doing. And we all know, y'all, it's a tough world out there. There's always a lot of stuff going on in the news that can get us down. So I am super excited to dive in with him. He is also the host of the High Cost of Anonymity podcast, where he speaks about the topics of mental health, addiction, and overcoming these obstacles each and every day as a part of his show. But without further ado, y'all, I want to introduce Preston Moore. So thank you for being on the show today. How are you?
Oh, doing well, Stuart. Thanks for having me, man. It's an honor and a privilege. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, I actually had the opportunity to listen to a couple of episodes of your show as we were getting ready to record this. And I think I would love to just have you start out by sharing a bit about your background and how specifically you got so involved with the topic, with the conversation of mental health activism in the workplace and beyond.
Sure. No, I appreciate it. Short story is, I used to get in a lot of trouble when I was young. I grew up in Texas. Mom was a hairstylist. Dad was a newspaper publisher. They did a lot of things right. They taught me right from wrong. They taught me don't lie, cheat, or steal. If it's not yours, don't take it. Look someone in the eye when you're talking to them. And where I'm from in Texas, yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am is very, very important. But with that good upbringing, they taught me how to work hard, show up no matter what. Both of them were business owners, so there wasn't any calling out sick. And so those are all great things. But I also learned, if you work hard, you get to play hard. And everybody around us was a good, fun time for the most part. We had a lot of friends, a lot was going on. And I also made the connection, Stuart, really early. They didn't necessarily teach it to me. I just picked it up, that everything was funner. Everybody was in a better mood. There was a lot more excitement when there were ice chests around. There were those cans that come in the 12 and 18 and 24 packs, the big bottles with the handles on them. And so early on, I started experimenting with alcohol, worked into other substances, but I got my first DWI my senior year in high school. I was 17 years old. At that point in time, it was my parents' fault, the counselor's fault, the police fault. I didn't know about the disease of addiction. I didn't know about obsession and compulsion. And all I wanted to do was get out of school, get my own job, make my own money, make my own decisions. Graduated high school, got a real estate license. I started working pretty much immediately. 2 years later, drug possession. A year after that, a DWI. 3 months after that, another drug possession. So here I am, in some areas, responsible, productive, functional, high achieving in a lot of ways. And yet this other area, I was unlucky. I was wrong place, wrong time. I was having these, in my mind, it wasn't any different than anybody else that I was around, because at any given moment, my buddies, were with us. My parents were with us. I mean, we're right next to everyone. I wasn't getting mean. I wasn't getting in fights. I wasn't falling down drunk or anything like that, but I kept getting arrested. And so the state of Texas insisted that I quit doing what I was doing. Imagine that. Forced into strict probation, forced into rehab. And I remember being there at 21 years old around a bunch of old people. They were like in their 30s and 40s. I mean, as far as I was concerned, they were ancient. Having a hard time identifying because I didn't look like them. I didn't talk like them. They were talking about losing jobs and houses and families. And I was this buttoned up, yes sir, no sir, respectable kid in a lot of ways that was just unlucky. And through a couple of different events and people and mentorship, sponsorship, hard work, I got sober. It was September 10th of 2001. So I just celebrated 22 years in recovery. So I went,
Congratulations.
thank you very much. But I went all that time. I graduated graduated college, went to Texas A&M, met my wife, moved to Houston, moved to Philadelphia, always in sales. But when we moved to Columbus, Ohio, which is where we live now, we moved about 4.5 years ago. I said, I'm gonna make a career change. I want to work in addiction. That's actually what I said. I wanted to work in addiction, but I didn't want to be a counselor. So I found part of the business development or outreach is what they call it in the industry. So I go around and talk to other treatment centers and hospitals and whatever. But I actually got a job not for a treatment center. I got a job for a mental health hospital.
Hmm.
And that is where I started understanding what the mental health care system looked like, what the drug addiction system looked like compared to what I was used to, which was like 12-step support groups, counseling, coaching, and therapy, mentorship and sponsorship, which is kind of free and of service. And so what I do now is I teach and train around the gaps. Like, what does it mean when they say, what does therapy mean, for example? What is this type of therapy? What is if you go see a psychologist, what does that mean? What's a coach? Like fitting all that stuff together, and talking about, in my words, would be the solution is in the mirror. Although we know that mental health and addiction is a big issue, the healthcare system, the criminal justice system, insurance, school systems, universities, everybody knows it's an issue, Stuart, but nobody knows what to do about it. And there's huge gaps between finding a counselor, hiring a counselor, paying for a counselor, seeing someone consistently over a long period of time. How do you cover it in cost? Does insurance pay for it, et cetera? What if it's your kid, your wife, et cetera? And so, although we know there's an issue, there's big gaps. And so what I tell parents when I'm on the phone, spouses, employers, that as much as you want to help that person who's struggling, who they're calling me about, that the solution starts with you. You need to go to your own meetings. You need to see your own counselor. You need to do your own relationship work, not focus on the person that was like me, that's really standing out, getting in trouble or doing, whatever crazy thing they got going on.
Yeah, wow. And thank you for sharing all that. And clearly this is something that you came to not only from your experience, but also just from a place of passion that you can basically support other people from your experience.
Yeah.
Something that comes up for me in my story, I thankfully don't think I ever reached a point of addiction, but when I was working in baseball, I was definitely developing dependency on alcohol, I
Mhm.
believe. Working 100+ hour weeks, grinding it out. Everything on paper looked amazing about my life. Like if you looked at my LinkedIn profile, I was crushing it.
Yeah.
But I was going home at night, crushing a 6-pack a lot of nights and
Right.
needing that to be my equilibrium so I could muster the strength to go into the office the next day. What came up for me that I want to ask about is I heard you talking about how what I think maybe you'd call your rock bottom is the state of Texas telling you you got to go get help. Like you got to go do these things. For people that maybe aren't as fortunate to have some entity like that telling them to go get help, how can people check in with themselves to assess that something might be wrong
Sure.
and go find that help, or at least start taking those steps towards righting the ship, so to speak?
Yes, that's a good question. Because I will often tell people that especially when I go into treatment centers or the criminal justice system, Department of Correction, which is jails, probation, etc., is I tell them that we're the lucky ones. The lucky ones are the ones that have gotten arrested, that have gone to the hospital, because after you do that, once you might be able to bend, you might be able to get by and you were unlucky. But if you keep going back over and over and over again, it becomes very hard to debate whether or not you have an issue. So at least we know what the issue is. What you're talking about, Stuart, is what I call the functional middle. And I think that is the most undiagnosed group of our culture, is the people that have it together for the most part, that if you look at their family and you look at their life and you look at their bank account, like they've got they got all the things. They love their kids, their relationship is good enough, that all the things, but yet you don't know that they're managing their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions with substances. And so whether that's alcohol in the form of wine or spirits or beer, or pills, a lot of people overlook pills. They're taking Xanax and Adderall and other Valium and other things that they're using it to sleep. They're doing, and they don't even count that, right? Or they're smoking a little weed. So what I look at is, I would argue that many people that misuse, because there's a very big difference between an alcoholic and someone that is misusing substance, right? That when people are misusing substance, usually they know it, right? They'll defend it. They'll defend it with other people. Like if I said, "Hey, Stuart, you're probably having a little too much to drink," you'll defend it, but when it's quiet, that you're doing a little bit too much. And so what I find is, when I have people ask themselves a question, why is it that I'm using a substance to manage my emotions? What does that look like? When I get home and I'm stressed out, what do I do with that stress? Do I go work out? Do I do some breath work and meditation? Do I go for a nice walk with the spouse? Or do I go, whoo, man, I can't, let me get a couple drinks. That's how I calm down, right? I'm not saying that there's necessarily something wrong for that for everybody, but why am I using that to manage my emotions as opposed to something else? Am I eating Oreo cookies, or stuffing my face with croissants, that kind of a thing? And so if I can get people to start looking at, why do I find it necessary to use outside substances in liquid, pill, plant form? That's the first question. And what do I want to do about it, right? And if I start to look at and start to be aware, like every time I feel stressed, every time it's football weekend, we were just talking about that, right? That if anything, I remember thinking everything is funner when there's substances around, usually in alcohol form, right? That if I was going to go do something for fun, I would never even consider there being no alcohol around. And so if I wanted to have fun, I could use substance to have more fun. If I was down, I could use substance to feel less down. If I was stressed and overwhelmed, I could use a substance to make me numb, right? And so if we start there, then I can connect with more people, as opposed to debating, do I have a drinking problem or not? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'm curious, in the work that you do you see any commonalities between people for why they start to misuse substances, and any patterns that you can point out?
Sure. I think that in one of the workshops that I do, I talk quite a bit about family dysfunction, emotional dysfunction and family dysfunction. And there's a guy I love his content. He's back from the 80s. His name is John Bradshaw. And the reason I like him is because we talk about mental health and addiction as if it's some new crisis. But John Bradshaw was doing 10-part series on PBS, an hour a block. That's 10 hours of content that he was doing on the dysfunctional family. And what John would say is that our society is sick because our family is sick, and our family is sick because we are living by inherited rules we never wrote, right? So we're living by rules and beliefs that we never wrote. But he says our families are sick because about, he would say 97% of families are emotionally dysfunctional. The new numbers are really more 60 to 70%. But I would say you might be dysfunctional at a 3, and you might not even rank on the scale, right? But what does that mean, emotional dysfunction? That means that, does my emotional reaction match the situation? Or am I overreacting, underreacting, etc.? And so everybody has some form of insecurity. These are the cores, Stuart. Insecurity, self-worth, fear, and kind of mixed within that, as our girl Brene Brown talks quite a bit about, is like the shame and guilt cycle, right? Because I don't feel like I'm enough. Any given moment today, 22 years in recovery, I meditate every day. I do all kind of personal development stuff. Any given moment, Stuart, if I'm not right mentally, emotionally, spiritually, I'll feel this small, like I'm not enough. I don't deserve this interview. I don't deserve that paycheck. I don't deserve for anybody to listen to what I have to say. So whether my solution to that self-worth, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to make it, etc., whether my solution is high achievement, which is what you were talking about earlier, checking the boxes, grades, making sure my LinkedIn looks good, high performing as a manager, or my solution is pour me another, or my solution is I'm just going to be kind of right in the middle. I'm going to show up to work every day. I'm going to take care of business. I'm going to be a good family man, but my goal is to be numb, right? Those are solutions to that hole in the soul, which usually resonate with, I'm scared of something, I'm worried about something, I'm nervous about something, I don't feel good looking enough, or I just don't feel worthy of what I've been given. So I compensate with success in buying, or I underperform and just say I'm never going to match up, so I'm just going to underperform. And both groups, because there's a bunch in the middle, but both groups are looking at the other as if they're different, and they're actually not. Their solutions are different. What they've how they've chosen to manage it is different. But when I look at people, no matter where they come from, and I say, I don't feel like I'm enough, I don't feel like I deserve, I feel shame at how I acted with my son, almost to the T, everybody goes, me too. I know what that feels like. And and the commonality is that, but our backgrounds are different, where we come from is different, our skin color is different, our sexual preference is different, right? Those are kind of the roots: fear, shame, guilt, self-worth, and some form of insecurity or low self-esteem.
Wow. Yeah, and I feel like I have so many follow-up questions on what you just shared, but I guess maybe to try to thread the needle for them. Earlier in this conversation, you said that the solution is in the mirror, right? Which I equate to getting people to take a look at themselves, take responsibility for where they're at in real time, and understanding that it's they themselves that get to flip the script, that get to make the choice, to make the change, to course correct, or maybe never pick up the bottle in the first place, so to speak. If you are unable to support somebody in taking that look in the mirror and taking that responsible, self-committed action, are they doomed to hitting rock bottom, or is there any other way to get them to course correct or right the ship based on what you're describing?
I would say no, they're not doomed, because none of us are doomed, right?
Mhm.
In some rooms, in some circles that I run in, we talk about hitting rock bottom. We have the other side of that coin, which are the savers. Usually they're the families of, the spouses of, the helpers, right? As one of my colleagues would say, we could get high on helping, right? The helpers are usually the person they're trying to help, that's their drug. The other person's trying to get high on helping. Meanwhile, the more they try to help, the other person's like, no, get away, get away, get away. But it's not don't help. That's not accurate. It is, you need to learn how to help someone that is struggling. And that goes not just with people that struggle with mental health and addiction, that goes in relationships, Stuart. How many relationships, whether they're married or not, usually the conversations are like this. Well, you need to change. And they go, no, I don't. You need to change. And they go, no, I don't. No, you need to change, right? It's the same thing. Brothers and sisters, bosses and colleagues, intimate relationship, it doesn't matter. Everybody's pointing the finger at each other. But as soon as I go, you know what? I'm gonna one of my mentors would say it's like throwing the ball back to each other. I'm gonna throw it. I know what she's gonna say. She's gonna throw it. She knows what I'm gonna say. And I'll take the ball and I put it in my pocket, and I start to look in the mirror and go, where am I off here? Usually it involves other people for me. I like to call other men and I'm like, hey, can you believe what she did? But these aren't guys that go, yeah, you're right. These are guys that go, well, what did you do? Well, let's look at that. Is that selfish? Is it not? What are you scared of? Right. And so, that takes time, but the number one way to help that person is you want to be loving, you want to be supportive, but you don't want to be, what's the word, where you're trying to bulldoze them and force them into it. You don't want to be codependent and enabling, but here's the number one thing. If you're not doing what you're asking them to do, they're not going to listen to you.
So tell me more about that.
I'm glad you asked. This is what I'm talking about. Usually when you're talking to someone about an addiction or mental health, right? Let's just use that because that's very easy. What they're telling that person is not only do you need to cut back on how you're managing your emotions, right? You need to change that. You probably need to hire some sort of counselor or therapist because we know you got emotional problems. I mean, look how you're acting. You may even need to go to meetings because, again, you keep going back and forth. You're having this problem. You need to go because I've seen it on TV. One of my friends said you need to go to one of those meetings. If it's even real bad, maybe you need to go to the hospital or to rehab. And what they're saying is, hey, you need to change everything. Everything that you've been doing since you were a child on managing your emotions, you need to change everything. And then what they're saying is, I don't need to do that. You need to do that. Look how crazy you are. Look how you're acting. I don't act like that when I'm drinking. But from their side, they're going, you're telling me I got to change everything and you're not going to do anything. Right? So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what I tell that parent, that spouse, that person is to say, hey, I love you. I want you to change. I'm concerned about you. If you need some help, I'll help you, but to a certain extent. And then go, I'm going to hire my own counselor. You don't need to profess. That's manipulation. I'm going to hire my own counselor. Go start talking to a counselor and go, what am I missing within me, within my life? Where can I improve in my relationships? Where can I work on my insecurity, my self-worth, overwhelming desire to help, right? And so, and don't even tell them this isn't like I'm going to do this and you do this. If you do have mental health and addiction that close to you, go to 12-step support groups for families. It's called Al-Anon. That's one. NAMI, National Alliance of Mental Illness. That's another one for mental health. ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Family Dysfunctions. That's a really good one. CODA, Codependence Anonymous. That's a really good one. And most people on here that is listening to that, they're probably thinking two things. One, I don't need that. I'm not that bad. Or two, that doesn't apply to me. If they would just make a few changes, we'll be fine. That's part of the problem, right? So if you're that close, there's a guarantee that you're doing at least 50% of the damage to them. Yours just doesn't involve the substance or as bad. Wow. But even more importantly, Stuart, imagine this. I'm talking to my spouse. We're butting heads. You change. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to argue with you anymore. I love you. It's all good. Do what you're going to do. I'll support you if I can. And 9 months later, I come to that person. I go, hey, man, I've been going to these meetings. I've been doing this. Wow. Hey, I need to make an amends to you because I haven't been loving and caring as I thought I was, blah, blah, blah. And I've been going to these meetings. Maybe you should go. Right. And they go, 9 months you've been doing that? The truth is when you start doing that, the behavior changes anyway. So that person that you're trying to help and fix starts to go, they're fighting differently. They're not doing the things that they were doing. Wow, that's weird. We're getting along so much better. But they're not getting along because they changed. They're getting along because I changed. right? And so
Yeah.
it's modeling the behavior that you want in the person. And that, even if it doesn't involve drugs and alcohol, Stuart, if you want to change your marriage, quit talking about your spouse. You go do it.
Yeah.
You don't
Yes.
need them to change for you to be okay. My
Amen.
question is, why do they affect me emotionally so much? Right? That's the one. And then the last thing I'll tell you is, if I want to know, Stuart, how to stay married, I don't need to go ask my single buddies. Right?
Facts.
Right. If I want to know how to stay in a long-term committed relationship, I have no business talking to my boy who's been married for 3 years and he's on his third marriage. No shade or anything, but I want to learn how to stay married long-term. If I want to be an expert in IT, a plumber, a professional speaker, I ain't got no business talking to my hairstylist.
Yeah.
You with me?
100%.
So when I'm trying to fix my relationship with someone that is struggling, I need to go around those men, women, families, spouses that know how to deal with that. You feel me?
Mm-hmm.
So that same thing with an alcoholic drug addict. I don't need to go ask my buddy who can drink a few beers a night how to stay sober. I need to go around other alcoholics that have been where I've been, done where I've done, used against my will, done all this crazy stuff, even if they've always kept their job. I need to learn from them, not from my neighbor.
Yeah. Wow. Yo, Preston is putting us through an absolute mindset and personal development clinic today. So I hope you guys are taking notes, because I have been this entire conversation. I think the biggest thing that I want to say in response to all that is that the theme I keep hearing you bring up over and over again is responsibility. Like, looking yourself in the mirror, you are the solution. Whatever decisions you have made up to this point have led you to the exact moment that you find yourself in this moment listening to this podcast. And so if you got yourself here, you can also get yourself out of this set of circumstances as well. It might require some collaboration. It might require you surrounding yourself with the right people, as Preston so eloquently put, but it is possible, y'all. And this is why I wanted to have him on the show, because the folks that listen to this show, at least the feedback I've gotten, are high achievers, people that are go, 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 do, do, do. Yeah. Probably will tend towards the I will sleep when I'm dead mentality.
Yeah.
And at least in my personal life, and I've already mentioned it today, but when I was leaning as hard as I could into that mindset of I got to just grind in order to create the life of my dreams, it was when I was at my most miserable, and it was when I was the most susceptible to substance abuse. And I want to make sure that the people listening to the show today are hopefully not in that set of circumstances, but in hearing you, Preston, are checking in with themselves. Am I enabling myself? Am I enabling others? And what can they do about it?
Yeah.
And I would love to just ask you, going back to your personal story, was there a moment or moments where you were trying to look in the mirror, do that type of work, and were struggling to take that level of responsibility, and how you shifted that to create what you have today?
Here's what I was thinking when you were talking about the listeners, substance abuse, or substance misuse, right?
Yes.
Is most people do not know that what they are doing is abnormal, right? So here's what I mean by that. Now, earlier I said most people that are struggling, that are drinking too much, they know. Everything's on a spectrum, right? When you're really putting it in, right, you a lot of times, but a lot of that functional middle, we hang out with other people that look like us, talk like us, vote like us, parent like us, relationship like us, work like us, right? We sure there's some variation, but it's similar. Mm-hmm. So when we're surrounded by that, Stuart, we think, oh, this is normal. Mm-hmm. Right? This is how you do it. This is how you work. This is how you get ahead. This is how you relationship. This is how you negotiate. This is how you tie up the end of a hard week, right? Mm-hmm. And so one, a lot of people don't know that what they're doing is abnormal. That's why I like talking about other compulsive behaviors, right? Other dysfunctional behaviors. And let me explain. When I talk about substance addiction and misuse, right? Only about 10% of our population would be considered or diagnosable for the disease of addiction or alcoholism or other compulsive behaviors. That's only 10%, right? Of that 10%, there's only about 1 in 20, maybe 1 in 30 that are actually seeking help and treatment, which is a very small number. So when we're talking about mental health and addiction, so many people, if they don't have a diagnosis or they don't have a substance issue, they go, oh my God, Stuart Preston, what a great topic. My cousin needs this, but they don't.
Yeah.
Oh, my neighbor needs this. They don't, because people are looking for a reason subconsciously to separate themselves. But let's talk about work.
Yeah.
Right. Let's talk about the anxiety, or that overwhelming desire to prove myself that wakes you up in the morning and have you working long hours. And then when you come home to be with your spouse, you're not really there. Right? Your bank account looks right. You're getting the pat on the back at home, or sorry, at work, but your home life is a little cray cray. This is just the work part. When I go talk to my people that are in treatment or in jail, I say, what's the difference between a father that gets arrested and sent off to jail for 10 years, the dad that works 60, 70, 80 hours a week that's never home, and then the dad that's home, but he's never available because he's either on the TV or he's under the influence and not engaged, right?
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing. They're both abandoning their child and spouse in some way, shape, or form. It just looks different. But one group of those men are heralded as great, and the other was like, man, what a loser. They got sent off and abandoned their family. Right. That's why in treatment, a lot of the children, when we're talking about schools, treatment for kids and mental health, a lot of kids that come from affluent and high achieving households, right? Upper middle class, upper crust people, and the low socioeconomical groups, which are like our poor, the people we go, oh, those people are, poor them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their kids are experiencing the same exact issues. Right? They both have their own form of abandonment. Both are looking at the other. At least the low socioeconomic peeps are looking at the rich peeps and like, hey, what do you have to cry about? You have a dad, or at least they're buying you things, or your mom's around, but they don't know that mom's taking anti-anxiety medication, that she shames and guilts them to death, that they behave one way behind up in front of everybody out in school and out in public, and their home life is an absolute nightmare because they're trying to make sure that they do all the things, and it creates all this anxiety. It's the same thing, Stu. It's the same thing. And so there's that. There's the work. There's obsessive cleaning, obsessive worrying. There's shopping, so like spending, overspending, so going into debt. Obsessive saving, right? They don't spend. They got plenty of money, but they in their mind they're always broke. There's all kinds. Overly strict, right? Overly strict is often like sometimes associated with like overly strict militaristic families, overly strict religious families, or the punishment doesn't match the crime. Maybe they don't put their hands on their kids, but they shame and guilt them to death. Like now when we're talking about that, when we talk about, hey, no matter what, even if you get that promotion, your bank account looks right, and your wife does this for you, and your kids are, how do you feel for real, for real, for real? And they go, well, I still don't feel like enough. I feel like I got to do it again. When we can get on that stuff, instead of talking about substance, which so many people go, I don't have a problem. It's not a big deal, right? We can get on that. Now we've got equal footing because now I can get to you. Because all I got to do is talk to you for a little while and I can figure out what your thing is. If we just talk about mental health and addiction, 80 to 90% of people are excluding themselves. They're thinking about someone else, not them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's going to land for a lot of people listening. Something that came up for me, because you were coming up with some of the non-obvious ways that this kind of takes hold of families and also just in our personal lives. I spoke a little bit earlier about how during my baseball days, particularly with the New York Yankees, I was definitely veering towards alcoholism. What I was actually abusing was caffeine. Like I
Mm,
kid you not, you know, a lot of those days would be 15-hour days, days on end, often wouldn't have the weekends off.
yeah.
I know at one point I worked, I think like 43 straight days. And those large iced coffees at Dunkin' Donuts that are like this big,
You
I
you
would,
were on you were on the East Coast when you were doing this, right?
oh yeah, oh yeah.
That's what I say, because you went to Dunkin'.
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. No, no. It wasn't by choice. It was just what was there by
That's
Yankee
what's
Stadium.
there everywhere.
But these things are this big, they're like the big gulp cup you see at 7-Eleven. I would drink two, sometimes three of those a day of just black iced coffee and wonder why I felt like garbage all day, every day. But then I would do it again over and over and over again. And, I had no concept of personal development or even just taking care of myself so that I could create what I wanted in my life at that season of my life.
Sure.
So I did have to hit that rock bottom. And so I just wanted to share that in case it resonates with anybody, that it isn't just drugs or alcohol, y'all. And it actually could be behaviors that are more or less, taken for granted by society. Like, oh, Stu loves his coffee,
Yeah.
but I was hurting myself every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I usually try to stay away from that topic because I will still drink 3 Dunkin' Donuts if you let me. But you're right in that the it's we have to look at everything as a big picture. And then if you work with a coach or a counselor or therapist, is let's get into the motivation. What's the
Mhm.
driver? What's driving this work, this behavior, these relationships? Like, one thing that nobody likes talking about is food, right? That
Mm. Mhm.
how many people overeat, undereat, obsessively work out, eat a bunch of bad stuff, they don't read the labels, they're eating tons and tons of sugar. I mean, I struggle with sugar. Sugar and caffeine are topics I don't like addressing because, well, one, you typically don't get arrested for it, but two, I struggle with that. You're right. It's a
Yeah.
challenging thing for me. But a lot of things that's rampant in college and a lot of high achieving industries is Adderall, and so
Ooh,
many
yeah.
people. I mean, if you look at the chemical makeup, the chemical structure of Adderall, it is one, and I don't know if it's molecule or a piece of something, right? You imagine a chemical
Yeah.
structure.
No,
It
I'm
is
with you.
one piece off of methamphetamines,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not saying nobody needs Adderall. That's not what I'm saying. But
Mhm.
the amount of people that use Adderall as a mind and mood altering substance under the guise of achievement, you don't, you don't, you're not looking at the behavior, the compulsion, the distance. Because when you're on Adderall, you're performing well, but you're not super connected to your emotions, right? You're not always
Yeah.
super engaged. Some people can perform, but they're not really there.
Mm.
Marijuana is another one, right? The people say, oh, it's natural. It's, God's plant. Mother Earth gave it to us. But marijuana and alcohol, as a matter of fact, is some of the most anxiety and depression inducing substances, even though people use it to manage their anxiety and depression. That's why I always go back to the answers in the mirror, because if I'm not talking the reason I can identify with you or identify with someone, the struggle or the insecurity or the self-worth, I can see it because I do it,
Yeah.
right? I'm in it, right? I know what it looks like. I know the questions to ask because I know it hits me. And here's the other thing, Stuart. I teach what I need. I still struggle. One of my you heard of Jen Sincero
Oh
with
yeah, I love her.
I love her, and I've heard about her before, but she really hit me between the eyes. I was at Lewis House Summit of Greatness, and I was there going, I've already heard this stuff. I'm just here to see my friends. I mean, I don't really care, but Jen Sincero hit me right between the eyes when she said, new level, new devil, right? new level, new devil. And in my circles, we talk about, we do 12 steps. We talk about character defects and shortcomings. And I would always tell people that when you work on these things, when you're pulling out those underlying driving, motivating factors, or the things that shortcomings within your personality, when I work on those, it's like, yes, I've done so well. And then they go change clothes, and then they come back and get me somewhere else. So it's like the same thing, new level. I done raise my mental and spiritual levels up, and all of a sudden I got something else up there I got to work on. Often it's something I thought I worked on in the past. Same thing when I go down. If I level down, right, I'm struggling. It's just something else, and it's constant. This is important. If I could self-diagnose, Stuart, if I could see it for myself, I wouldn't need you, and I would need a mentor or a counselor, or those meetings, or come teach it because I'd figure it out myself. So most people, when we're talking, they're going, oh, they're diagnosing themselves. Oh yeah, I have that. I don't have that. I don't really struggle there. But get with the coach. Go get with a counselor that's got some skills. Go get with another man or someone of your same sex, right, that's done some work, and try to run that bull junk by them, and then see how level-headed and calm and collected you think you are. And so that's another valuable thing, is it's not just counselors, coaches, therapists, whatever. It's surrounding yourself by other people that are ahead of you, right? They're a little bit ahead of you so they can help. And then you're helping people behind you. So you're reiterating, teaching what you need, and then doing that constantly, because you can't just do it once, right? You can't just do this little bit of work once and be like, all right, I'm good to go. Nope, it comes back. Another year, another level, another devil.
Yeah. So good. So good. And maybe just to summarize what Preston just shared, y'all, like, surround yourself with people who care enough about you to not buy your bullshit, quite frankly. Like, don't allow people to do you the disservice of holding you low, of letting you not look yourself in the mirror and fix the things that you claim that you want to change about your life, but that you're not actually doing anything for. And we've said it so much on this episode in particular, but who you surround yourself with matters. Feedback is a gift. That is something we've talked about on other episodes as well. Just somebody who's able to look at your life externally, whether it's a coach or a counselor or a friend or anybody that cares enough about you and your success, is going to point these things out to you so you can work on them.
Well, I've got a couple things. I know we're kind of coming up to time, but a couple things that I felt that have just really made an impact on me. One is one of my favorite podcasts. It's called Dad Saves America. And there's a guy on there, I believe his name's John. He's the host, but he has all these different people on, and he's talking about mental health, awareness, masculinity, parenting, that kind of thing. And his most recent episode was with Jay Glazer. Now, Jay Glazer is he played sports. He taught athletes MMA. He's a famous correspondent or TV personality. I mean, a masculine guy. And he has been very open with his mental health and things like that. And so he's on that episode, he's talking about all these things that he does with his men. But he said something that was so impactful about building that community, right? So your community is multifaceted. Yes, a coach and a counselor and a therapist would be great, but that's just one person. You're only going to see them 1, maybe 4 hours a month, Stuart. 1 hour, 2 hours a month, right? Then you got support groups. So I go to support groups. I don't go to as many as I used to, but that's about 1 to 2 a week, maybe. So there's another couple of hours. But then getting your road dogs, your men around you that aren't going to poo-poo your growth, right? That you can open up and say, hey, I'm struggling. But he said something. He said, if I don't tell my friends when I'm struggling, I rob them of the opportunity to be a friend.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I speak to people in schools, community groups, professional organizations, universities, right? And I say, how many people in here love to help people? They all raise their hand, right? Oh my God, I love to help. I love to help. But they don't like being helped. And when they struggle, they don't want to say nothing because I'm embarrassed. I should know this. I'm ashamed. Oh, they don't want to hear it, right? But what I'm actually doing is I'm robbing those people close to me of doing what they want to do for me, which is to be my friend, to love on me, to be compassionate, right?
Yeah.
And if I can't openly share that, right, then I don't get it. He went on to tell a story about he was traveling somewhere. They had a gig. He was going to be on like a game or something like that. He called the host that he was going to be working with, and he said, "Hey, let's have some dinner." All four said they had plans, and he said, "No, man, I'm serious. I need you to show up. I'm struggling." All four canceled their plans, showed up for their boy, supported him, and a couple of them said, "Hey, man, I'm glad you shared that because I've been struggling too." So what happened was, because he was able to let his friends in on what's going on, and because he's had a lot of practice, you hear he's not just doing that right off the bat, he's got a lot of practice, but he was able to tighten that container with his buddies that he travels with and bring them in, not only for them to help him support, but also to offer his support when they need it as well. Such a great perspective and a good episode if you want to listen to something cool. Dad Saves America, just the one with Jay Glazer, but there's a ton of interviews on there that I absolutely love. The host is excellent.
Yeah, no, definitely going to have to check that out. And folks, I know that you've gotten value out of this because I am taking notes like you wouldn't believe on this episode. And I wish we had another hour, Preston, just so we could keep going, but we don't, unfortunately.
It's all good.
But before we head out for today, I want to make sure that people know where they can connect with you, learn more about you, and what are the best places for them to continue the conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. My all my Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, it's K Preston Moore. I probably should have put the K on my name there, but K Preston Moore, K for Christopher, kprestonmoore.com is my website. Preston at kprestonmoore is my email. All my socials are at K Preston Moore. I've got a podcast called The High Cost of Anonymity. I've got over 200 episodes on there that you can go and listen to, workshops that I've done. I speak professionally, so if you know of anyone that needs someone to come in and talk about stigma prevention, moving the conversation forward, and most importantly, how do we get friends, family, coworkers, kids to utilize services before they need them, instead of waiting until they get sick, waiting until they get arrested, waiting until they get a diagnosis, and then go, oh, we need to do something about stigma. So if you know a speaker, a conference, a support group, you holler at me, and I would love to connect with you. Thanks for having me, Stuart. It's an honor and a privilege.
Yeah, Preston, and I think we're definitely going to have you on again in the future, on a future episode. So, final question for you today. I ask it of all of my guests. What are you acknowledging yourself for today?
I'm doing a lot of work around my language with money and language with my self-worth. And the reason they're tied together is whether I'm talking about podcasting, speaking, my profession, money, my relationship is usually when I get that gift from God, my higher power, the universe, that says, wow, I would love to do that. The first thing I say after that is, that's not going to happen for you. You know that if you get too much of that money, it's going to ruin your relationship. You better not, right? This is all subconscious. And what I've been doing is, and that's thanks to Jen Sincero, Joe Dispenza, which is who I do a lot of my meditation with, is I've really just been grabbing onto, how do I talk to myself about money? How do I talk to myself about success? How do I talk to myself about my parenting and my relationshiping? And when I catch myself being negative, right, I say, hey, I forgive myself for being negative, and I just reframe it. Not even necessarily something positive, but just something that's more neutral. that I'm opening myself up to things coming to me easily and effortlessly, that I deserve it, that I'm worthy of these gifts that I'm getting when I'm meditating, and trying to live into that as if it's already happened. That's what I'm deep in that, Stuart, and so I want to acknowledge myself for that today.
Dude, thank you so much for sharing that. And that is a podcast episode topic in itself. So
Absolutely.
maybe that'll be the next one. Well, Preston, I can't thank you enough for being on today. And folks, again, please continue the conversation with Preston. He is at K Preston Moore on all of his social media. Check him out on TikTok, Instagram, anywhere else you're hanging out as well. And again, y'all, I know that this was a great episode, so please share this with somebody. Share this with your friends, your family, anybody that you love and care about and want to support in leveling up their lives. This has been your Inside Track to Success. As always, I'm your host, Stuart Cranes. We will catch you next week.